Dad. You are how old today?
83.
83. And so when you were 23 years old, something happened to you. Tell us about
23 years old and July the 7th, 1953. The day of infamy. I fell 86 feet over the tail race gates at the Waneta Dam project.
it. Tell us how that happened.
Well, it happened because I opened my big mouth. These fellas had to move this heavy, high voltage electrical cable, and with the manpower that he had, he wasn't sure how he was going to do it, because overall the cable probably weighed half a ton. It came off the top of the powerhouse and went down to feed these big vertical 2300 volt water pumps to keep the water from front of the tail race. So anyway, we were walking back, and he said, "I don't know how we're going to handle this cable." I said, "Well, George and I we've got to go that way. We'll give you a hand as we go by," not realizing really what it was. So we got to the spot. I'm standing over the tail race gates. It was just an open slot. There was some temporary planks on it. Looking down at where the pumps were, trying to figure out how we're going to do this. We hadn't really discussed it with the guy. And my partner, George Prosick, was talking to him. And George had a sensible idea. Well, what are we handling this cable for? It's so heavy. Used the overhead crane there. And he barely got it out of his mouth when the guy cut this temporary tie. This temporary tie was holding a kind of a loop of cable there that weighed about 300 pounds. Cut this loop of cable, and this loop of cable came down on the planks that we were standing on. It was just like somebody pulled the pin on a trap door. Down I went. I had no time to grab anything, just gone. And George, my partner, he was hanging by one arm. He just happened to lean over against the building just at the time this thing hit. And he was hanging by one arm. In fact, they pulled him up, grabbed a hold of him by his neck and pulled him back up by his neck. Otherwise, he'd have been on top of me likely.
Do you remember the fall?
I just remember seeing the edge of the concrete as I went down the chute. I thought to myself that this is it, because I don't know how far down that was. Well, I fell through the tail race gate slot, which is this point right here, down 85 feet and hit this big vertical water pump.
And you landed on your head, correct?
Didn't land on my head. I went straight down feet first. But what really saved my bacon, there were she-bolts. This is what I figured. There's construction bolts that hold the forms in place, and they were still sticking out. And as I went down, these bolts caught my clothing. My clothing was in shreds. I have a big scar on my buttocks, about this long, from ripping my buttocks open. Tore half my nose off. Half my nose was hanging off. And I got scars all over my arms from scratches and things. This shoe was completely gone off this. My boot was completely gone off this leg, and my stocking. This shoe on my left leg was hanging. It was like a hinge on the door. It was hanging like this. So I figured that the combination of getting hung up on these she-bolts and hitting this big pump was round like this on the top. Hitting it, and it threw me back, smashed my head into the concrete. I don't think otherwise I would have survived. The day before that I fell down that slot, there was rebar sticking up like this down on the bottom, and they had just bent it over like that. And I landed on top of that. If I'd landed on the rebar, it'd be over.
Well, the paper listed your injuries, but actually your injuries were more extensive, weren't they? Tell us about those.
Well, starting at the top of my head, I had fractured skull. I had 3 fractures in my spine, broken pelvis, double compound fracture to my left leg, broken ankle, broken foot, 3 broken toes, and multiple lacerations, cuts and what have you, all over the place.
Were you unconscious?
For a short period. I don't think I saw. Actually, the first guy that was down to me, George, is the guy that had actually darn near come down with me. He was the first one to get down to me, because he had to run all the way the full length of the powerhouse, and then climb down that hole, that area that they hadn't blasted out, that was keeping the river out of the front of the powerhouse. He climbed down there. He was the first one there, and I was kind of remember being hung up like this in she-bolts and stuff. And this one guy comes down there, another one of the ironworkers comes down. He says, "Well, how are you doing?" I says, "Well, I'm in pretty good shape for the shape I'm in, but in a lot of pain."
So you felt the pain at the time.
Oh, yeah. I thought, I hope it don't take them too long to get me the hell out of here, because I was in a lot of pain. Particularly my back was really bad.
How did they get you out?
Well, they took that overhead crane and they lowered a stretcher down there, and there happened to be a mine safety, an old guy that he was a miner, but he was working on that job. But he had been a mine safety rescuer in one of the mines there, and he was working on that dam. And he came down, and he rode up in the stretcher with me out of the hole into the ambulance. He sat on the stretcher with me going, and they lifted me probably 150 feet in the air in that stretcher to get me out of there. Yeah. This old mine rescuer from, we actually was from Kimberley. He put a splint on my leg, temporary splint. And when they got me in the ambulance, my leg was bleeding really bad, and George got in the ambulance, and he was holding my leg like this. The blood was running between his fingers, and he had his head down like this. And I don't think the wheels touched the ground. He was going so fast. And one of the other guys was holding the big vein in my leg here to try and stop the blood from coming out. Right? So I remember finally getting to the hospital and seeing those white uniforms, those nurses. Really comforting feeling. They don't fool around, boy. Out come the scissors. Cut all the clothes off. Yeah.
And you were in the hospital how long?
I was in the hospital for 2.5 months before I got to come home. And what happened was on my leg, they put a stainless steel plate in the brake, and it came loose. They left a gap there. The idea that the gap would fill in with calcium, I guess, or with bone. Didn't do it, it came loose. When I walked, my leg was flopping up and down into my cast. So when I came home, my brother, who knew this top orthopedic surgeon at VGH, my brother talked to him, and so I went to see him. And he said, "Well, we don't use that method anymore. You need to have a bone graft." So we made an appointment and everything. I went to the hospital and I did a bone graft on my leg. And with that, they take and cut a slot in their big bone. They take that piece of bone and they slide it over top of the brake. And then they pin it together. And then they take the other piece and put it in where there was a hole there. And then eventually it knits together. Anyway, after 1 month, you have an outpatient clinic there, so I had to go and see the doctor there. And he says, boy, he gets my leg in his hand like this and starts twisting my leg. I'm just waiting for it to break, you know. He said, "You know, that's the best bone graft I ever did." I said, "Well, that's kind of reassuring." He says, "I'm going to put a heel on your cast. I want you to walk on your cast." I said, "I don't think I should walk on it yet." He says, "I don't care what you think. You're going to walk on it." So he put a heel on my cast and I started walking on it.
Wasn't there some question about whether you'd be able to walk again?
Well, I didn't know really what the outcome was going to be, because because until I started physiotherapy, I mean, I couldn't walk hardly worth beans. My knees didn't bend, my ankles didn't bend and everything. So then I had to go to WCB, had this physiotherapy clinic in Kitsilano. And I had to go there every day for about 4 hours a day and go through a number of different classes. And it sure paid dividends, boy. When I was finished, I could walk. There was no limp, no anything. And it's only in later years that this all started to come back on me.
And at the time you were injured, didn't you have a girlfriend who was a nurse?
Yes.
And didn't she leave you?
Well, when I was taking out this student nurse from St. Paul's Hospital, and when I got hurt, she came up to Trail, and she worked in the hospital there for 2 weeks. So she would come and see me every day. And then, of course, she had to go back, so she went back, and then I was due to come home, and she was concerned, because I said, because she said, she wanted to call it off. And I said, well, what's the problem? Well, she had an excuse or something. I said, I think the problem is, you think I'm going to be a cripple. And then that was deathly silence, eh? And I think that's what it was. I think she felt I was going to be a cripple. I wasn't at that time. That's what it was. Yeah. Gladys.
Gladys.
Gladys, her name was, yeah.
What was your last name?
Skelen. She was Norwegian. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice girl.
And then how soon after this accident did you meet Mom?
Well, I was off for 13 and a half months on compensation. And then September 54, I went back to work. And it was in about January 54 that I met your mom at a YWCA dance. That's where you met your mom, yeah.
And then you were married when?
Then we were married in, what year was it? Oh, we were married in October the 14th, 55. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm going to stop for a minute. So when you got injured, you weren't even doing your regular job. What was your regular
Well,
job?
my regular job, George and I, we were troubleshooting. We were part of the crew that kept the plant running. We had to maintain all the electrical equipment, all the high voltage equipment, the pumps, the hoists, the cranes, anything to do with electrical stuff, lighting, anything like that. We're the guys that kept it going. There was usually two maintenance guys on each shift, and the job went 24/7. So there was two maintenance electricians on every shift, at least two.
Who was your employer?
Stone and Webster.
Stone and Webster?
Stone and Webster. There was a consortium there. The general contractor was Northern Construction, J.W. Stewart, and Stone and Webster. They formed a consortium to build the dam.
How many surgeries did you have?
Well, I had the initial surgeries when I got hurt, because they had a number of different guys working on me at the same time, working on my head, working on my nose, working on my foot, my ankle, and then the other big one was when I went to get the bone graft. Yeah. And of course, subsequently, I've been back for physio in later years when all this problems come back on me again for treatment. And it's still ongoing right now.
Right. And you said that you were on compensation for 13 months. When that ran out, what did you do?
Well, now when I ran out, I went to work again. I went back to work.
For the same
Right.
company?
I couldn't go back to the dam because the job was wound up, or winding down anyway. So I went to work for a local company in town here. And I worked for them I wanted to go back to my old alma mater, Human Rumble, but the work was slow. So I had to go to work where I could get a job. So I went to work for Rick Sewell, rewiring the Britannia High School. I worked there for about 4 months. And work was still slow. And I was off, I think I was off for probably a couple of months or 3 months. There was nothing. And then this job came up at Waneta. So I took that job at Waneta, planning to stay for about 6 months or 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I could make $1,000 a month there, which is quite a bit of money then. So this is what I had planned to do until work picked up in town here, and then I was going to come back and try to go back to work with my old company.
Right.
But I was up there from April, May, June, and July the accident happened, so around 3.5 months, I guess. Yeah, about 3.5 months.
Okay, anything you want to say as a wrap-up?
Well, I was just going to say that the plastic surgeon that sewed my nose back on, he was such a funny guy. He sewed my nose back on and he said, "Oh, you're still beautiful." He says, "I don't think it'll stop you from getting married." He sewed up my head, he sewed up my nose, my head, and there's a scar here. You just barely see it. He sewed that up too, yeah. But he was funny, that guy. And he was telling me one time, like, when they take the cast off your leg, have you ever had a cast on? Well, the first time they took the cast off my leg, they didn't realize that my ankle and my foot and my toes were broken. And I was, several days after I had the accident, I was laying in bed and my leg was in a sling off a bar on top. My toes were sticking up like this. And Dr. Krause, who was a surgeon that worked on my leg, he comes in and he puts his hand on my toes are sticking out of the cast. "Well, my boy," he says, "how are you doing?" I just about went right up through the roof. I had 3 broken toes there. Man, that painful. He didn't realize I had broken toes. Didn't realize I had a broken foot or a broken ankle. Anyway, I go to take the cast off, and they had a big pair of like bolt cutters go down like this. When he hit my ankle, I just went about one airborne because the jaw opened up and pushed on my broken ankle. Of course, he opens it up now. I can see I got a broken ankle and broken foot. So they x-rayed it, and he says, "Well," he says, "I don't want to operate on it. He says, "If I operate on it, it'd be worse off than you are now because the bones are so smashed up in there. There's one bone that sticks down on the bottom of this foot, straight down, and it wears out my shoe because all the weight on my left foot is on a piece of my foot about this big. And I got all kinds of shoes, left shoes that are worn out. I got all kinds of right ones that are not worn out. But it's just because of this bone, eh?"
To this day?
So anyway, they put another cast on. So this Dr. Colbert, the plastic surgeon, was going to take the cast off one day, and he's got this device. It looks like a skill saw with a blade on it. This blade, and I looked at this thing. I said, "You're not using that skill saw to take this cast off, are you?" He says, "Oh, it's not a skill saw." He says, "It's a vibrator. It vibrators back and forth like this." He says, he says if it, if it does touch your leg, unless we really push on it, it won't cut. And he was telling me he had a patient one day and he was demonstrating this thing, how safe it was. And he put it against his hand, and he put it against the, I guess, the hard part of his thumb. He says the blood was shooting out. He says, "I didn't convince the guy at all."
Did you stay in touch with George?
Oh yeah, yeah. I talk about every month and a half, I guess. He phones me or I phone him, yeah. He's not very well though, he's got some heart problem.
Did you meet George at the Waneta Dam project?
Yeah. Met him, yeah. I told him, I said, the only good thing about this whole project is that I met you and your family. Because otherwise, look at it.
Yeah.
I said, that's what I got out of it. But the good part of it is, I got a lifelong friend. Tremendous, tremendous guy. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. All right. I'm Janice Booth. I have three brothers and sisters. Let's start that again. No, just leave it. I'm Janice Booth. I have three brothers and sisters. No, I don't. I'm Janice Booth, and my father is reminding me that I have two sisters and one brother. And the reason that we're all here today is because of this hat. This green, beat-up, hard-boiled hard hat. And we're going to tell you the story about that now.
You're gonna make it up.
No, I just need to hear it.
Okay, what do you
Okay,
want to
so his head, start when the head was split wide
Okay,
open.
so his head ripped off, and then
Ripped off. Who put his head back on?
his head was supposedly split open, and his actual brain was exposed when the guy got to him,
And the miner put it back in?
and the miner closed his head back up.
And then what about his eyes?
Well, I guess all the muscles that control your movement of your eyes are wrapped around your skull, right? Mm-hmm. And then when the head split open, it disrupted all those muscles, so he had to retrain his eyes to focus and all that because they were all torn up and messed up. So, and then like I said, Brosick said when he got down there, they put a tarp over him and said he was dead. And he said, no, he's not dead. You can't kill that man, he's not dead. And then
And they were right.
and this industrial first aid attendant who was assigned to that job that day went into shock and had never seen anything as bad as that and couldn't attend to him. He went into shock and was useless at the scene. And it was the miner who saved his life, not the first aid attendant.
Do we know the name of the miner?
I don't think so.
Wow.
Your dad called him a minor rescue worker.
That's right.
He actually rode on the crane. When the crane picked him up from the bottom and pulled him up on the what do you call it?
Man
Stretcher?
basket, yeah.
So the crane they loaded a stretcher down on the crane, and on the crane when they lifted him up, the minor rescue worker was with him as they lifted him up to the ambulance.
That's something.
Yeah, he said that yesterday.
Yeah, but he said that if it wasn't for the miner, that he'd be dead. There's no doubt that he would have died.
Maybe it was the miner and Prosick that went in the ambulance with him.
Probably.
Those are the two guys that
Yeah.
went with him. One was holding his artery that was bleeding so badly, and the other one was holding his leg that was broken or crushed. And they were, as they rode, and he was conscious. I mean, the amazing thing is he was conscious after he fell. Because he remembers all this stuff that happened.
Yeah.
So Colby, if Grandpa hadn't been wearing his hard hat, you wouldn't be here. What do you think about that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Our family, I guess, is pretty lucky because I don't know.
Because your grandfather was saved.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess.
you're very lucky.
What do you think, Rob?
I think my lips hurt because I good squeezing them. That's what I think. Can you let go of my mouth so I can talk? Or do you want to just move my lips and you talk for me?
So, he thinks about this.
Yeah, you gotta say it like a puppet.
So, he thinks.
No, you gotta move my mouth.
So, he thinks that. Oh. Hi, my name is Robert Fifth, and I think that I am very lucky that my dad was wearing the hard hat. So thank you everybody, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you for coming.
I just wanted to say I like my French fries big size at McDonald's. And hey, I'm not done. And salty.
Oh! What do you do?
Squeezed him really hard.
Oh, what do you do?
Ah, you asshole! Whoa,
Whoa!
Way to go. Now the video was family orientated, now it's X-rated.
whoa. Let's see.
Way to go.
Oh, you ruined it. You ruined it.
You! Like in Caddyshack. You!
Well, there wasn't anything in Caddyshack like that.
Yeah, it was the guy with the white hair or whatever.
The
He's
judge.
the judge. He's
Judge
Ted
just,
Snell.
Baxter.
Judge Snell.
just getting pissed.
You.
You! Get off of my golf course! Okay.
Okay, so
Turn the camera.
don't tell me what to do.
Oh boy. Whoa,
Oh,
whoa,
yeah.
whoa here. What's
Whoa.
going on here?
Oh, okay. So a hard hat equals what?
Life.
Lack of a hard hat equals
Death.
Well, this was what I called my campaign helmet. Hard hat. I wore this through many different jobs. Working underground, that's why this bracket's on the front for the fit lamp. And then when I went to Waneta, I took it with me and was wearing this hat at the time I fell. And I fractured my skull. The hat stayed on my head. I must have had my chin lanyard down to hold it in place, but I was thrown back against the concrete, hit the pump, thrown back against the concrete, and split the hat here, all along this here, all this area here. And that's where I fractured my skull here. And that's where the fracture was in my head,
Where was the fracture on your head?
right here.
Oh my.
Do you still have your stitches?
I got a recession, a depression in my head there.
That explains a lot.
When it rains, the water gets trapped in it. Yeah.
Put the helmet on. Let's see how it would look with you wearing it.
I probably had this liner down like this.
That still fits,
Yeah.
even
yeah.
with all that loose skin.
Yeah. For anybody that had their life saved or been saved from major injury rather, by a hard hat with one of the Bullard Company. The Bullard presented us with, or presented me with this with a membership in the Turtle Club. So we got this hat and a lapel pin and a certificate with the description of the accident on it. Of course, I've never worn it. It was too nice a hat to take out.
Well, put it on. Let's see what that looks like. Looks good.
Wait 1 second. Let me just.
Fits where it touches.